Hi, this is Justin with PowerMill Tip of the Day. Today we are going to look at how to handle part revisions in PowerMill. Now, oftentimes you will have an engineer that you're working with that needs to change the design file that is provided to you, or the CAD model that's provided to you. And inside of PowerMill, we need to know how to modify that. So with this, I'm going to go through a couple of things. The first thing we're going to talk about is translating the part, not translating the part, putting the part on your machine, creating a new block from the geometry that we import, going on from there. So the first thing I want to show you is that this part was imported from the CAD software, which we used was Inventor. We've got it here with the part revision. As you can see, it is different from the one that we have. Now I have toolpath here that is calculated for this part, which was given to me as the revision 1. And I chose not to transform this part to the global transform, but to simply create a new work plane in the orientation that I want to cut my parts in. Now when we turn on our machine to do our simulation, you'll notice that my part's in an orientation that I don't want to cut. So what I would do at this point is come into my machine tool tab, choose the drop down, and choose a work plane where the part is going to sit on the table. In this case, I just created a work plane that was 200 millimeters below the bottom of the part where it's going to attach the table. In this case, I'm going to have a little bit of a riser for this part. And now my part is in this location. The reason why this is important is because when I go to bring in the new geometry, I don't have to worry about any previous translation that I did inside of PowerMill. I can simply import a new part and go from there. So the first way that we can do this is if I have the PowerMill project already open, I can go into my file and you can see I have my new part here and my old part here. So I'm going to rename this as the old part, and I'm going to change this from new to the same name. At this point, I will right click on my model and I'm going to choose re-import model. I'll choose this top one that's going to go to my project folder because that's where my parts are kept, and I'm going to choose that part 1 female mold that I just renamed. At this point, it's going to go through the process of re-importing the model so that I can make modifications to my program. You'll see the warning message that we have that a new model has been detected and to check our component thickness and machining modes. And at this point, I now still have one model in here, and I can reapply my block and calculate my toolpaths again. Now in this case, we manually put that part by re-importing it. I'm going to go ahead and close this file and not save changes. And I'm going to drag and drop that project file into PowerMill so that it loads, and you'll see that because we have that same file in the location and it's named the same thing, PowerMill knows that this model has been changed. It's asking now, do we want to re-import them? So I can choose yes, and it'll go through the same process that we had before of importing the new model without having to choose which file it is if it has the same name. Again, the same warning that our component thicknesses may have changed, but now we have that new part. Again, I'm going to choose that machine attach point on my machine tool location so that it's Z up and not following the transform. And now I want to recreate the block for this new model. So I'll go to my Home tab and choose the block. And in this case, I used a boundary to define my previous block because it was a wire cut piece of foam that I'm going to use to lay up. So with this, I'm going to come into the settings of my boundary. I'm going to clear what was there prior, and I'm simply going to add with the model button here a user-defined boundary for that outside of the model. I'm going to change this to block. And I'm going to use this drop down to create it from a boundary. At this point, we need to set our Z minimum value, which I will just click on the bottom, press accept, and choose the top, and press accept. At this point, I have my toolpaths that I've created in the previous program that are calculated with the old block. And I want to modify those by adding the new block. If I was to activate one of these toolpaths, then it would overwrite the settings of the block with what is loaded from that toolpath. So in this sense, I want to have a function that overwrites the block without me having to load the old block. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a custom button to the ribbon interface to do this. So I'm going to right click on the ribbon interface and go into Customize Ribbon. I'm going to come into my tool tab called PowerMill Tip in my block, and I'm going to choose to create a new command. Now the command that I want to do is to edit parameter of the selected block. So I'm going to type in the name of the button, modify block for selected, and in this case I found my expression by running the echo commands window at the bottom, and that can be done just simply by clicking the echo commands and then applying that block. So you can see edit parameter selected block. And now I want to come down and choose to then add the block, add it to that tab, and press OK. Choosing that toolpath and coming to my custom tab, I can apply the block to the selected toolpath, and you can see now that it's going to tell me the referenced item is going to become invalid. Do I want to continue? And I can press yes. Now I can continue to do this for the rest of the toolpaths. And now at this point I want to recalculate my toolpaths for the new model. Now I can do all of this by right-clicking on the toolpaths area and choosing batch process, but in this case you can see I have a couple of duplicates of the roughing toolpath. I really only want one of these to calculate. So I can click on the calculator next to the name, and you'll notice that a little red X pops up next to the calculator, which is an indication that when I batch process this, those are not going to calculate. Choosing batch process, you can see that we go through the process of recalculating the toolpath, and I don't have to open up the settings of the toolpath and calculate. At this point, we can simulate our toolpaths to verify that they're doing exactly what they were supposed to do when we programmed them the first time, but on the new model. Thanks for joining us on today's Tip of the Day.